Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to North Star Oasis. Today is the 3rd of January, 2015, and it is not pucker your lips frozen cold yet. That's tomorrow's weather. I'm your host, Jeff Williams. I want to say thank you for joining us for our first episode of the new year. And just also want to remind you that we have 356 shopping days left until Christmas. Yes, as we finish one Christmas season, here we are ready to go right on into another one. Don't worry, you got a year away yet. A funny thing happened on the way to the studio today. I happened to have received an email from Colonel Ben Scardon. Colonel Scardon is, I believe he's 98 years old. Let me see if I can get this right. 97, 98 years old. He is a survivor of the Baton Death March, which kind of leads us right into where we left off last week. Now, Colonel Scardon, he walks the Baton Memorial Death March at White Sands, New Mexico, every year. He may not walk the whole 26.2 mile marathon. I believe when I was out there 2 years ago, he had done, I think, 9 miles. Might have been 6. But hey, when you're almost 100 years old, you can walk as much or as little as you like. But it's really nice to see Colonel Scardon out there, and he's getting ready for this year's Baton Memorial Death March. I believe is March 22nd of this year. So 3 more months, and Colonel Scardon will be walking out there with everybody else, something he's been doing for a number of years. And it was an honor for me to be able to march with him a couple of years ago. So that brings us up where we kind of left off last week. Last week, I brought up the film Unbroken, which was the story of Louie Zamperini, former 1936 Olympian who was a prisoner of war in the Japanese camp. Really went through a lot of tough challenges that I think would break the backs and hearts and spirits of most of us who are alive in America today. Zamperini passed away this past July at age 97, but Angelina Jolie has directed the film Unbroken, and so we're just going to go right into showing you the official trailer for Unbroken right now, just to give us that sense of place. If you haven't seen the movie, this may be something new for you. If you have already seen the film, then if you haven't seen the film, then please go on out and take a look at it. That's what we're going to talk about today.
However dark the night, however dim our hopes.
Inbound 4 o'clock road.
The light will always follow darkness.
Keep going the way you're going, you end up as a bum on the street. You train. You fight harder than those other guys, and you win. If you can take it, you can make it. You can do this, Lou. You just gotta believe you can. Pop does. Ma does. I do.
Louie, a moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory.
We're gonna die out here.
We're not dying!
I got good news and bad news.
Who is the Olympic athlete? Don't look at me. Hello, Mother, Father, this is your Louie talking. I am now interned in a Tokyo prisoner of war camp. I can't say this. What it says about America is not true. This man must be taught respect. Each prisoner will teach him this lesson. I used to think that I could do anything, that I was better than I am.
Who says you're not?
If you get me through this, I swear I'll dedicate my whole life to you. If I can take it, I can make it.
Stay down.
If he drops it, shoot him. Come on.
Okay, we're going. And that was Unbroken, the film trailer. And I'm just having slight technical difficulty, so please give me just a moment. Okay, well, it seems that we're set over here. Okay, with Unbroken, that was released on Christmas Day. I've got a few stats about the film right now. It appears in 3,131 theaters across the country. It was the third highest Christmas Day opener ever, since they've been keeping track of statistics. So far in 8 days, for all of the domestic box offices, receipts that came in as of January 1st, so it does not include yesterday's total, it has grossed $69,456,000 in 8 days. That does not include the $2.7 million in the foreign receipts, making a total of $72,156,000 grossing worldwide. Right now, as of the other day, it is the 974th top domestic gross of all time in films. And I had one other stat here. And Gone with the Wind is still the highest ever of all films made. There were 202,044,600 tickets sold, estimated by Box Office Mojo, to see Gone with the Wind when it came out in 1939. The unadjusted gross for that film was $198,676,459. But the thing about Gone with the Wind was in 1939, the ticket prices were less, the population of this country was less, the ability to see a film was less, so that still remains the top grossing film of all time, is Gone with the Wind. But right now, 974th for only being out for 9 days. Well, it's even higher than that now. But for only being out 9 days, this is an impeccable movie. I went and saw this on its first night of release on Christmas Day. And the one thing, and this is kind of why I ended the show last week with this. I just hours before had written my review of that film. So I want to read that to you right now, and thankfully it's short. Back in 1990, I was named co-chair of political action for Minnesota Won't Forget WWII Incorporated, which sought a full accounting of prisoners of war from the Vietnam and Korean Wars, along with World War II. When I was a youth, one of the customers on my paper route was a repatriated World War II POW from the Eastern Theater. As a historian and Minnesota Civil War Commemoration Task Force member, I'm keenly aware of the perils of Andersonville and those former prisoners who died aboard the SS Sultana. As a veteran myself, I spearheaded a movement while deployed to Kuwait to include Gulf War MIA Michael Scott Spiker in our Veterans Day program, and I've worn numerous POW MIA bracelets and gave many away of them as gifts. Yes, I've done a lot of things and have been part of various movements related to this issue. I say this because I watched the film Unbroken on its first day of release. My assessment is this: Angelina Jolie, the director, accomplished more to raise awareness of what prisoners went through in 137 minutes of screen time than activists have managed to do in over 20 years of activism. However, I hope that Angelina Jolie does not get the Oscar for Best Director. Here's the reason. Best Director historically is the second place trophy for Best Picture. I believe that this one should take home the Best Picture honors. It is that good. My only critique of this film in areas where it could be improved is in the use of timestamps to provide context. If you studied World War II in the Pacific, you might be able to pick out some clues as to when certain events occurred because there are no references in the chronology. I believe that adding the timestamps would have enhanced the film's context, and if my only nitpicking critique is something that minor and almost inconsequential, then yes, I believe this is one of the best films that we've seen in recent years. So take a few minutes out of your day to watch Unbroken. You'll be glad you did. Now, right now I don't have it posted anywhere, but as we continue to bring our show forward, we're going to be having our website soon, so we'll make sure there's a link up there. And we do have a Twitter page, or a Twitter account, so please go out and tell us your story if you've seen Unbroken. Tweet us at Star Oasis. Like us, follow us, whatever, and then make sure you hook up with our show. And so with that, we're going to just take a look at what a few other film goers, this actually came out of California, on what they have to say following their screening of Unbroken.
Hey, welcome to the segment. Tonight we're watching Unbroken in the lap of luxury at the Luxury Plus Galaxy Theater. So let's go and see what the first fans have to say about the movie. So what'd you guys think of Unbroken?
It was pretty good. It was definitely motivational, inspirational.
What'd you think?
I thought it was really good too, the ending and how they said that he turned his life to God or to serve God in the end.
What'd you think of Unbroken?
I thought it was a very good movie.
All right.
But even better than I thought it would be.
Now let's compare this to maybe other war movies and stuff. Is this got a real good feel to it, or what do you think compared?
Yeah, I think it's not like another war movie.
Okay, so it's really unique then.
Yeah.
Well, it was a scary time. My stepdad was a glider pilot, and he didn't think he'd come back. He went to Europe.
Wow. So he was flying some planes himself.
Well, he did transports, but he flew gliders that had no motors. Landed behind the lines.
And so I'm sure in here you had a connection with the movie and stuff. Now, what'd you?
The whole movie, I had a few tears, and it just took me back to how we felt at home.
I thought it was a great movie about a man's will never to quit. He tried very hard in sports as well as in World War II to survive and live, and sometimes you have to be very strong, and not all heroes are unknown. He was a guy that just survived and made it through.
What'd you think?
It was great. I mean, it's real, like real life. I mean, it's...
And I guess it was based on a true story, and I'm just wondering, as you're sitting through there, it sounds like it felt like a true story, too. I mean, you got to feel the struggle.
Yes, you did. And it's just, right, you were right there.
And I know he wasn't a superhero, he was a real man, but now, as coming out of this, did you feel inspired to, do great things yourself?
Oh, yeah, well, that's the whole thing. You get motivated to show you there's no limit to what you can do.
With Angelina Jolie was the director. I don't know if you knew that, but what did you think of her directing style?
She's done a good job.
Okay.
Very good job.
Cool. All right. And then how does it leave you feeling as you're coming out? Do you feel inspired, sad, happy? What do you think?
Well, I feel glad that it's over.
Okay, because it was
not the movie, but the war.
Okay, all right. Angelina Jolie's first time directing. What do you think about the style of the movie?
She was better in Tomb Raider.
Okay, so you liked her better as an actress. All right.
We went to the movies every Saturday so we could see the news on the newsreel because you didn't read it in the paper or watch it on TV.
Having seen the original kind of newsreels and lived through it, when you saw the action scenes in this movie with the planes themselves and stuff, did that look real to you or what?
Very much so. Okay. Very much so. It was
so they got it right.
An interesting period of time.
It was a great movie to watch. Well done. I was surprised that Angelina Jolie did it, and that it was kind of a guy movie.
Okay.
Very World War II, a lot of action.
So there's a lot of action too, because I know a lot of it kind of seems like it's a lot of struggle, but there's a lot of war stuff in there.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it was based on a true story. It's amazing a guy lived through that.
Which is wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And I guess 45 days in the ocean, and that was all true too. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think another thing, it shows you what you'll do to survive. I mean, they had to eat raw fish. I guess I don't want to tip off the story, but I guess the will to live is greater in some people than others.
Okay.
So anyway, it was a great movie.
So it sounds like a recommendation. Thank you very much, sir. All right, thanks. Well, that's what the first fans had to say about Unbroken. Now go ahead and give us your review in the comment section below this video and tell us what you thought. Be sure to check out a Luxury Plus Galaxy Theater the next time you go and see a new movie, because it's an amazing way to see a new movie in the lap of luxury. And subscribe to this YouTube channel, because we're going to be back here next week with more first fan reviews. We'll see you then.
Well, actually, what we would like you to do is subscribe to us on Twitter at North Star Oasis. I want to thank Modesto News for providing that video to us, but really we want you here. Just watching that just reminded me of a couple things. Movie Town News. That was, you know, I was never old enough to really have to get my news from Movie Town News on Saturdays. I remember fondly my grandmother telling me of different things that she'd seen when she'd go, actually both of my grandmothers, when they'd go out and see films and they'd have to go and catch the latest release. But that was completely a different time. One of the guys mentioned that one was a guy kind of a movie. But I have heard from some women that have watched this since it came out that they've actually enjoyed the film. And so it's not just for guys, but it's really for anybody who really wants to understand what people can endure. You know, the one person said, the will to live is stronger in some people than others. And you know what? That's actually true. And we've heard this throughout history. We've heard this throughout, you know, the Civil War, Revolutionary War, through the Vietnam War, through even like 9/11. You know, the will to live, some people have it, some people want to continue on, others don't. How that exactly plays out with each individual person, whether it's nature or whether it's nurture, is just anybody's guess. And I don't think that scientists have actually quantified what it is about some people that makes them want to live more than others. But even when people are at the end of life, you know, you can tell those who want to hang on and those who just say, you know what, I've had enough, I've lived a rich, full life. So with Louie Zamperini, yes, he did have that will to live. You know, of the U.S. POWs who died in captivity in World War II, 9 out of 10 of them did so at the hands of the Japanese. And one of the people who came very, very close to not coming home in World War II was George H.W. Bush, the 41st President of the United States. George Bush, as a young Navy ensign or lieutenant, he actually flew his first solo mission. Does anybody know where George H.W. Bush flew his first solo flight when he was training in the U.S. Navy? Does anybody? I wonder if our young intern, Andrew, knows. No, he's shaking his head and scratching his head. No, he doesn't know either. It's not Pensacola, Florida. It's actually Minneapolis. George H.W. Bush was here at the Minneapolis Training Base, which is now currently part of the Air Force Reserve Complex, and he made his first solo flight in 1942. We've flown in and out of that same space anytime you fly in and out of Minneapolis-St. Paul International. Now, I say this in a light of the material that we have, because there was an incident that occurred during his time in service in the Navy as a pilot when he was shot down. And he was shot down near Chichi-jima, which is an island not too far from its better-known cousin Iwo Jima. And as recounted in the book Flyboys by James Bradley, those who actually made it aboard or made it on land at Chichi-jima, those Americans, they never returned. They were treated to barbarous cruelty, and they lost their lives. Some of them were executed, beheaded. I think, if I recall, it's been 10 years since I've read the book, but I believe there were 9 Americans who were held captive on Chichi-jima, and George H.W. Bush almost became one of them. It was a submarine that actually had surfaced near him and was able to rescue him. And if that submarine wasn't there, who knows what would have happened. I tell you this, we wouldn't have had George H.W. Bush as vice president. He wouldn't have been president. We wouldn't have had George W. Bush president. We wouldn't have had Jeb Bush running for president. So just that one incident in World War II could have dramatically changed the course of American history. But he managed. But what the Japanese did to American prisoners was barbarous cruelty. And I'm going to give you a quote from an American general in the Civil War. We've heard the paraphrase of war is hell, but really the statement is war is cruelty and you cannot refine it. But my dear sirs, when peace comes, you may call on me for anything. Then I will share with you the last cracker. That was Major General William Tecumseh Sherman in Atlanta in 1864. So yes, he's got it right. War is cruelty and you cannot refine it. And the Japanese, they sure didn't refine their techniques in World War II. And so right now we're going to take a look at an interesting video that came out back in September 12th of 1945. This is at the Sendai area, northern Honshu, at POW Camp number 3, where a chaplain who was held prisoner was interviewed. I'm going to skip through some of the beginning here.
Chaplain Zimmerman, how long have you been here in this camp?
We arrived here from Taiwan in the last part of the month of January of this year. For the first part of the detail that came in here, there were 100 men who came a few days later. There were 200 of us in the first party.
I see. Where's your home, Chaplain?
My home is in Seattle, although almost any place in the state of Washington could act as my home because I've lived all over the state.
How long have you been back here? How long have you been overseas? How long has it been since you've been back
I came
home?
to the Philippines in May of 1941. We arrived here in the 8th on the transport Washington.
So it's been better than 4 years now.
Yes, it's been 4 years since I've been home and seen my family.
What little I've seen of this camp, I noticed that they treated you pretty well here. Isn't that correct?
Well, compared with our treatment in the Philippines, we've been pretty well treated here. Although perhaps you wouldn't think so, yet to us it's been almost, as one of the Japanese said one time, consider yourselves in paradise.
Is that so? What happened in the Philippines in particular that makes you say this treatment you're getting here is much better? Was the brutality very severe there?
Well, after the death march into Baton, we could stand almost anything. We have seen men die and not turn a hair. We have seen men beaten to death or brutally treated, and we don't think anything about it. We got rather numb to it. For example, I remember, it was on the 26th of June. The first year we were in Baton, in Cabanatuan rather, there were a number of men who were going out at night and getting through the small barbed wire fence we had for surrounding our camp at that time. And one night they captured 6 of these men and executed them the next day. I was acting as hospital chaplain at that time, and 2 of the men were brought over to the hospital area to be executed. But it so happened that that day we had, for the first time since we've been in the camp, an issue of flour, sugar, and grease. And so our cooks got busy and corned up some donuts for the men. Donuts were issued to the men just at the time these men were brought out to be executed. I went out with my donut in my hand to watch the execution, and suddenly looked around and noticed that there were about 500 men watching this execution, eating donuts while some of their comrades were being shot, thinking nothing of it.
Okay, cut.
Action.
What's your name, soldier?
I'm Private First Class Alvin James Opishon, sir.
Abidjan?
Abushan.
Abushan.
Yes, sir, French.
Where's your home?
St. Louis, Missouri, sir.
St. Louis. Born and raised there?
No, sir, born in Chicago, raised in St. Louis, you might say.
And when did you come overseas?
I came over here in 1941 on April 22nd on the U.S.A.T. Republic.
So you were in the Philippines when the Japanese attacked?
Yes, sir, I was.
When were you captured and where?
I was captured on Corregidor on May 6th, 42, sir.
I see. So you missed out on the death march, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I was fortunate to miss out on that.
That's one of the things that sticks in the minds of most of the boys. But I've heard many other stories from them, too, of brutality in the camps. Was it pretty bad in the Philippines?
Yes, sir. We had a pretty rough time of it. It had its good points, but there were a few, believe me.
Did you get into any scrapes with the nips yourself?
Well, I got in one particular instant with a Japanese that spoke fair English, and I was digging a ditch around a gasoline storage house, and we got in a rather halfway conversation about the two countries, and he insisted that the Japanese flag would always fly above the American flag. Of course, everybody stopped working, and he asked me if I thought that the American flag would ever fly below the Japanese flag. I told him no, it never would. I told him the American flag would rise in the Philippines and all over. Well, out of that, why, he insisted that I ought to have a little trashing. So I don't know. I just took a beating for about 2 hours, you might say, and then his friend took over, and that was just one instant there.
What did he beat you with?
Well, he started out with his hands and ended up with a club, and he was going to draw his bayonet, I think. He made an attempt for it, and one of the Japanese officers came over there and stopped it, and that was the end of it for that instant.
Have any of the other fellows had similar incidents or worse incidents that you know of that happened?
Well, yes, sir. We had an incident in Palawan of a boy named Bingham. He was working around the Japanese mess sergeant down there, and for some reason the Japanese mess sergeant didn't care much about him or care for his actions, and he spilled some scalding hot tea on his legs and caused him to be laid up for quite a while. And he remains with good scars on his body.
I mean, he spilled the tea on his legs purposely?
Yes, sir. He actually threw it on there. It's like he broke their arms.
Okay, cut. What's your name, soldier?
Private First Class Benini, sir.
Private First Class what?
Benini.
Benini?
B-E-N-I-N-I.
Benini. Where are you from?
Pennsylvania.
What part?
Southwestern part, sir.
What's the name of town?
Acosta.
Acosta. Were you in the Philippines at the time the Japs attacked?
Yes, sir.
On Baton?
Yes, sir, on Baton.
Oh, you made the death march then?
No, sir, I was captured before that.
Oh, I see. And you were imprisoned in some of the prison camps there in Baton?
Yes, sir.
Or rather there in the Philippines?
Yes, sir.
What's this White House story you were going to tell me just a minute ago?
There was a building out at Camp Murphy.
Camp Murphy?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And they moved us out there from Nielsen Field. We'd been working on airports. They moved us out to this White House, and which was the headquarters of the 1st Philippine Division, if I'm not mistaken. And we were living there. And the chow wasn't very good. And these Japanese used to come into the compound. And they'd make off with a sack of potatoes or a sack of sugar or a sack of rice or something like that. And there was a fellow by the name of Burnett, I believe. Anyhow, he was one of the fellows who had guts enough to turn him in. Well, they turned this Japanese gunso in.
What is a gunso?
A gunso is the same rate as our technical sergeant, tech sergeant. And he was one of the fellows, like I said, who had guts enough to turn him into the Japanese officer. Well, that night, when he turned him in, the gunso brought some of his cronies over. They worked him over pretty good, and broke his arm besides. And if it wouldn't have been for one of the fellows and for one of the interpreter, or for the interpreter, the Japanese interpreter, they were going to bayonet him that night.
Sure. Well, where does it get the name White House?
White House was because of his big and it was painted white.
Oh, I see. Okay, cut. Colonel Gaskell, where's your home?
I'm a Texan. My wife at present is in San Antonio.
San Antonio, Texas?
That's right.
I see. Did you spend most of your home life in San Antonio?
No, I was born in Smithville, Texas, near the capital, Austin.
I see.
But I spent most of my early years in Texas until I was about 16.
Mm-hmm. When did you come to the Philippines?
In 1940, November the 1st.
Mm-hmm.
A good year before the war.
So you had spent quite a little time in the Philippines during peace times and know what a...
And that was the end of the roll. It was provided by the 9th Combat Camera Squadron during World War II. So 70 years ago, this coming September, that film was taken 70 years ago. And now we kind of look back and say, hey, whatever happened to those guys? But the fact is they made it through some pretty terrible conditions. If you've been listening to the audio, they came out and said that none of those guys were on the Baton Death March, so they feel fortunate just because they were captured in other means. And that just shows you just how cruel and how brutal things were. And yes, I will have to mention that in the United States, we also had prisoners of war, and we also had people who were unfortunately innocent, and that was the Japanese American people. They lived here, but because they were Japanese descent, they were put in internment camps all throughout the United States. It's still a travesty. We even suffer those consequences even today. I'm not going to say that we're, innocent and we don't do that kind of stuff. No, as we say about war is cruelty. And, it's really a shame that we've had to go through with that level of almost paranoia back then. We also had prisoner of war camps for German prisoners of war right here in Minnesota. I lived here now for 25 years, and I still haven't really even scratched the surface of looking at those camps. I haven't, growing up, I haven't really cared. Now I'm at that point where we're saying, hey, what actually did happen there? And that's just another avenue of research for me, is I've got to take a closer look at that. But right here in our own backyard, we had POW camps. But looking at the Japanese, it just seems that something was different. Something was different with the Japanese culture that occurred at that point in time. There was always a joke amongst certain World War II veterans that if you threw a hand grenade into a bunker with a German, the German would come out and put his hands up and yell, hey, surrender, I'm surrendering. If a Marine did that in World War II in the Pacific, the Japanese would throw the hand grenade back. And that's actually not even though it's a joke, really it isn't much of a joke, because that really is very similar to the mindset of the Germanic people versus the Japanese people as they relate to us as Americans. We seem to be more closely aligned with Germans. We had more in common with them. And the Japanese and the Americans really dehumanized each other. But if you look back at Japanese history, what were the aims of the Japanese? Believe it or not, it's to be like America. America had this vast wealth. We had the power. We had a naval fleet that could go all around the world. We built coaling and coaling stations for our ships. We had refueling stations all over the world. We had all over the Far East. And the Japanese felt that, hey, we've been trying since 1853 to be more like Americans, so perhaps we should be more like America. And the Washington Naval Conference of 1922 kind of puts the Japanese government down a couple of notches with the number of vessels that they could have in their navy and some other armament-related things, and then the Japanese started feeling squeezed. And then when you look at what happened with the Japanese in China and trying to dominate that area in their war in Manchuria, they were needing all of the fuel and all of the support that they could to have their war in China. And so then, by 1941, we wouldn't give them what they wanted. They wanted to be just like us, and so that only infuriated them even more. Then you add the different religious and cultural perspectives, and that only even exacerbated things even worse. So now we're going to take a look at an interview with Jim Horton. He was with the 21st Infantry Division during World War II when he was captured. And this is, he's going to describe his time as a POW in a Japanese camp, but it's coming from the perspective of history, from looking back and not immediately right after, but a number of decades had passed, and
was there a constant fear of making the wrong expression and having the Japanese react to that, or?
Well, you tried not to be in touch with them, to stay away from them as much as you could. But sometimes they'd get after some people for certain things and beat on them.
Was there a sense that some of their abuses were just arbitrary, just without cause?
Yes.
Well, why do you think that was?
Well, it's hard for me to... The Japanese had such a hatred for the Americans that they used every excuse they could to be cruel. Once in a while, if they had some new young guards, and near the end when the things started turning Americans' ways, the guards would sometimes say, tell the Americans that we've been good to you. Those were kids 15, 17 years old. But the veteran Japanese never were anything but cruel.
In the prisoner camp, were many prisoners just outright killed? I mean, obviously they starved and they were sick, but
sickness. But they didn't deliberately shoot them. But many of the guys died from illness and malnutrition.
You have mentioned before the march began that the Filipino soldiers were separated out. Were they treated differently? Do you know what happened to them?
Well, they were totally separated from us, so we don't know what happened to the Filipinos, but I'm sure that from what I have learned and read, they had it tough. Because the Japanese were so cruel. On the other side of things, there was one guard on the march who had been to the States and educated in the States, and he was sympathetic. He treated us differently, but one guy, you don't run into him too much. I have no ill will towards the Japanese today. I mean, that's past. There's no reason to be upset with them today.
So Jim Horton, just last few, one he mentions about illness and malnutrition. Let's take a look here at what we ended up doing during the American Civil War with illness and malnutrition. Andersonville and Elmira prisons. One Union, one Confederate. Both prisons were really atrocious. They had the same type of atrocities. Yes, it happened right here in America. But Jim Horton brings up a very interesting perspective from the passage of time. And he said that was a long time ago. And maybe it's time to get beyond that. And one person who managed to get beyond that was Louie Zamperini, the person that the whole film Unbroken is all about. And we're going to have a letter that he read to his prison captor.
This is a letter I wrote to Mr. Watanabe. As a result of my prisoner of war experience under your unwarranted and unreasonable punishment, my post-war life became a nightmare. I was not so much due to the pain and suffering as it was to the tension of stress and humiliation that caused me to hate with a vengeance. Under your discipline, my rights not only as a prisoner but also as a human being were stripped from me. It was a struggle to maintain enough dignity and hope to live until the war's end. The post-war nightmares caused my life to crumble, but thanks to a confrontation with God through the evangelist Billy Graham, I committed my life to Christ. Love replaced the hate I had for you. Christ said, "Forgive your enemies and pray for them." As you probably know, I returned to Japan in 1952, was graciously allowed to address all the Japanese war criminals at Sugamo prison. I asked them about you and was told that you probably had committed harikiri, which I was sad to hear. At that moment, like the others, I also forgave you and now would hope that you would also become a Christian.
Amen. Amen. Love replaced hate. That's beautiful. That's awesome. Louie, we are so honored once again. Thank you so much for being here with us today. What an honor to have you with us, and your testimony, your story is such an inspiration to so many of us. So come on, church, let's thank Mr. Louie Zamperini for being here with us here today.
Louie Zamperini mentioned post-war nightmares, the post-war nightmares that he had, the post-war nightmares that many other prisoners of war had, but it's the post-war nightmares that anybody who served in combat, American, Japanese, German, Vietnamese, Iraqi, war is cruelty. You know, some of us who've been to combat have the nightmares. A lot of broken families, a lot of broken people. But as Louie Zamperini has shown, that you can rise above that, that there is a certain kernel of hope. And if you can find that deep inside yourself, whether it's religion or whether it's just the will to live, the will to hang on, you can get beyond your present circumstances. And so as he reads his letter to the bird, the question is, what does the bird have to say in return? And here is the reply that we had from Matsuhiro, the bird Watanabe.
The Allied prisoners thought the bird was a sadistic psychopath. His Japanese comrades thought he was, well, a sadistic psychopath.
Even among the Japanese, he was disliked. He was hated by all NCO in Omori, Japanese NCO. Why? Why? No question. He was so violent.
This is Matsuhiro Watanabe, and this is the first televised interview of his life.
ビート、ケックンというのは白人社会においては非常な仕打ちだと。ただ殴ったりピートしたりする程度のものは共同生活の中でやむを得ない場合もあったわけです。
Zamperini and the other prisoners remember you in particular as being the most brutal of all the guards. How do you explain that?
ミリタリーオーダーでやったというんじゃなくて、やはり私自身の気持ちから見てフレンドにはならなかったですね。ザンパリニさんは有名な人だしだったんだし、彼が渡辺に殴られたというならば、キャンプ内でそういう事実があった ことは考えられます。私の立場上。
But Japan didn't remain an enemy of the United States very long, and in 1952, all charges against the bird were quietly dropped. The man who made so many lives so miserable sold life insurance after the war, became wealthy. Zamperini came back to Japan a few weeks ago, wanted to meet the bird, but the bird did not want to meet him.
Forgiveness versus just being obstinate. That's the difference. That's the paradox that sometimes comes out of war. The American prisoners who were held captive by the Japanese for years, for decades in fact, 7 decades, have wanted one thing. They wanted, well, 2 things. One, they wanted an apology from the Japanese government for the cruelty that was issued at them. 2, they wanted an apology from Japanese corporations that had used them as slave labor. Kawasaki, just one name that comes to mind. I'm not picking on Kawasaki, the motorcycle company as they exist today, but back in the 1940s, Kawasaki, I think Suzuki, those are just 2 companies that had used American prisoners of war as slave labor. And it's the remaining prisoners, 7 decades removed, that only ask for an apology from those corporations. They're not asking for money. They're not asking for anything other than just a simple 1-paragraph apology. Now, the Japanese government did that about 5 years ago. Japanese Foreign Minister Katsuda Okada had met with 6 former American prisoners of war, and he made the formal apology on behalf of Japan. And we're going to play that video clip for you right now.
We extend a heartfelt apology for our country having caused tremendous damage and suffering to many people, including prisoners of war, those who have undergone tragic experiences in the Baton Peninsula, in Corregidor Island, in the Philippines, and other places. Ladies and gentlemen, taking this opportunity, I would like to express my deepest condolence to all those who have lost their lives in the war and after the war, and their family members. As for the peace program, just Dr. Tenny referred, I have told him that I cannot make a definite statement at this juncture if we can expand this program. However, I can convey to you that relevant bureau in the government of Japan is working seriously and sincerely on this matter. Ladies and gentlemen, World War should not be repeated. Sufferings of many people, including prisoners of war, should not be repeated. Today, Japan and the United States are the closest friends, best allies. But we should always keep in our mind that this good relations is based on our past experiences and efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, we are committed to carry on the torch of our future to our future generations of this excellent and irreplaceable friendship and relations. I thank you very much for this occasion.
In a lot of Asian cultures, losing face is very important. Having an apology is a hard thing to do because you lose face. If you take a look at what we've had recently with this whole, the other film that made real big news over Christmas, The Interview, when there's allegations that the North Koreans are behind the Sony hacking scandal. One of the reasons I haven't mentioned it until now is because that is when you really unravel the geopolitical nature along with the cultural issues surrounding that. You've got really China, Korea, and Japan. And of course, Korea being divided into North and South, you've got really 4 entities that are all intertwined over there. And they're similar, but they're different. And when it comes to putting the blame on anybody, and then you have the whole stature of losing face, it really puts in things in a larger context when you have the deep-seated either hatred or rivalry that exists over there. So now, if you look at the Japanese companies, then that haven't apologized 7 decades later, that's still the whole face-saving ramifications. Still really have a lot of implications in this. And then, of course, if you've actually taken a look at the screening of The Interview, it actually is really a horrible movie, and to be creating such a stir. Because believe me, even before that came out, it's not, at least for me, it's not my style of film to see anyway. So I don't know why anybody would even care. Some people like that kind of humor. Hey, don't get me wrong. If that's the kind of thing that you really like, I'm not saying you shouldn't see it, but I just think that for the international implications that came out of The Interview, that it was really over. Well, that's like, what was that film? Team America. That's just as bad. But still, when you have a Japanese company, major corporation in Japan that may or may not have been hacked by a North Korean company or the government of North Korea, you got a lot of major implications that go far above and beyond one film. And I actually brought this up at work a couple of weeks ago, and one woman looked at me and says, "But they're not going to tell us what to do." Until I remind her that Sony is a Japanese corporation. Has nothing to do with us. Has nothing to do with our stand as far as what's going to be, looked at. So a lot of times when things like this happen, there are implications that are far above and beyond what we in America experience. And sometimes we're just not aware of that. For the last clip I'm going to show is one other World War II American POW clip that goes directly back to the previous one of the Japanese apology, and that is whether or not that apology has been accepted.
Apology accepted. That is the word from a fluorescent man who spent 42 months as a Japanese prisoner of war. That country's government has now officially apologized for the inhumane treatment. Fox News' John Obel has the story.
We just wanted a public policy that they did have these atrocities.
That apology finally came from the Japanese government 65 years later. 89-year-old Herb Swabo was among only 6 former American POWs invited to Japan for this first ever peace visit. He was 17 years old when he was taken prisoner in the Philippines.
They worked your fanny off, and the thing going from our camp and at the factory.
Slave labor is what the retired chief warrant officer calls it. Among other things, they built an entire airstrip for the Japanese. It all worked them down to a mere 70 pounds. And they'd be rousted from their bunks to watch the enemy shoot other prisoners. Often they were ordered to bury their comrades. Earl recalled medical conditions were deplorable. At one point, an American medic amputated limbs with a steak knife without anesthetics, and men died in droves from disease. They all survived on a diet of 1 rice ball a day. Later, some fish head soup that they made themselves.
So the Japanese would catch fish because we were right at the water there, the ocean was right there, and they would give us the fish head. They cut the fish and gave us just the fish head.
Earl feels fortunate that he escaped the terrifying Baton death march, walked by 12,000 other American prisoners. The long-awaited apology came last week in Tokyo, with Earl and his wife, Mary Elizabeth, coming face-to-face with the Japanese foreign minister. He said simply, "I offer my deep, heartfelt apology for the inhuman treatment you suffered." How much does it mean to you?
Oh, I mean, it means a lot.
John Obel, Fox 2 News.
Nearly 4 years after the war ended, Earl finally went home to Missouri.
So I want to read for you, once again, the quote from Major General William Tecumseh Sherman in Atlanta in 1864. "War is cruelty, and you cannot refine it. But my dear sirs, when peace comes, you may call on me for anything. Then I will share with you the last cracker." It's really gratifying to see the Japanese and the Americans getting along. They've been good allies. You know, the war is over. It's been over for quite a long time as far as the shooting. But what hasn't always been over are the residual effects that come with war. So now as a lot of the veterans are facing the last couple of years of their lives, I'm glad to see that they're finally getting their due. 11 years ago now, the National World War II Memorial opened up in Washington, D.C. I was fortunate enough to have been stationed over in that area just prior to its opening, so I was one of the few people who got a chance to get a sneak preview of the World War II Memorial. But to hear of organizations like Honor Flight, now that it's been open, to hear them being able to raise the funds necessary to bring World War II veterans, most of whom, if not all, who know that the time that they've got on this earth is slowly slipping away, that they get a chance to see the memorial built for them. We're seeing cooperation. We're seeing apologies coming out of Japan. We're seeing a spirit of reconciliation that's coming amongst that older generation. Those of us who are younger can perhaps maybe learn some lessons from this. The Korean War generation's also getting up there. Even the Vietnam generation is getting up there. And then my generation with the Gulf War and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're still young and middle-aged, but someday my generation will be up there too. So hopefully we can start taking a look now at what that reconciliation process is. We can take a look past the geopolitical nature of things, and we can start looking at improving not just this country, but let's improve the conditions in this world. The best way of being an anti-war protester is not to just grab your sign and go out on the street. The best way to prevent war is to not talk about how much you hate it, but it's to do something so we can better the climate, so that countries and different factions and ideologues don't go to war. A lot of that's going to happen if we reach out to people one person at a time. So go out and see Unbroken. I hope you've had a chance to learn a few things about what happened. And we'll see you next week.